tutorial on the perfect tense in Spanish. The perfect tense is a type of past tense. It's not as common at GCSE as the preterite and the imperfect, but it is still useful to be able to recognise it. And we use it to translate the phrase, I have done something, or she has done something. For example, he comido, I have eaten. Has vivido, you have lived. Ha bebido, he or she or it has drunk. Hemos visitado, we have visited. Habéis bailado, you, plural, have danced. And the last one, han estudiado, they have studied. So I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about how we form it, but the most important thing is to be able to recognise it, and when you see it, to know that it is a past tense. How do we know the difference between the perfect and the preterite, when to use which one, for example? So I'll talk a little bit about when to use the perfect and when to use the preterite. So we just said that the perfect is used to translate what you have done or what somebody has done. The preterite is used to say what you did, and it's a more of a complete one-off action, is what we usually say. So the key is this: if the time frame has finished, then we use the preterite, but if the time frame is still ongoing, we use the perfect. So what do I mean by the time frame? So let's have a look at some examples. If we talk about la semana pasada, when is that? Well, it's last week, isn't it? So if it's last week, that time frame is no longer still going on. That's a time frame that has finished because it was last week. It's not this week. So therefore, we use the preterite. For example, last week I watched a film. La semana pasada vi una película. Whereas the next example, esta semana, that is a time frame that is still going on. This week is still happening, so we use the perfect tense. For example, esta semana he visto una película. This week I have watched a film. And this is the same kind of with whichever time frames you use. Just always think about whether it's something that's still happening or whether it's something that has finished. So hoy means today. Today is still going on, so we use the perfect. Today I have watched a film. He visto una película hoy. El año pasado, can you remember that one? Last year. Last year, has it finished? Yes, it has. So last year we would use the preterite. El año pasado vi una película. Last year I watched a film. And ayer is also a completed time frame because it means yesterday. So again, use the preterite. And the last example, este año, that means this year. This year is still going on. So is this month and this decade. So if you're using the word this, it's an ongoing time frame. So use the perfect tense if you can. Este año he visto una película. This year I have seen a film. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about how we actually form the perfect tense then. If you're feeling confident with your grammar and you want to have a go at using it, remember you use it to say that you have done something and you use it for an ongoing time frame. So you need two things to make the perfect tense. It's quite different from other tenses that we've done because it's got two parts to it. The first part, which I'll do in a bluey colour, is the present tense of the auxiliary verb haber. Now, the verb haber just means to have, but you can't use tener, like tengo, when you're making a tense, because they don't do that. They use an auxiliary verb. So you have to use this haber verb instead. And then the second thing you need is the past participle. That's the thing that tells you that it's in the past. So in English, a past participle is something that usually has ed at the end of it. So the present tense of haber is the have or has, and then the past participle is the thing that you've done. So that little code, colour coding at the top, will help you kind of work out what's going on here as we form it. So here's some examples. Means I have, using the verb haber. Then if you want to form a past participle with a regular verb, there's only two options. For an AR verb, you change the AR at the end of the infinitive to ado. So he hablado would mean I have spoken. Comido is an ER verb in the infinitive. So with an ER or an IR verb, we take off the ER or the IR and we change it to ido. So for your past participles, it's either going to be ado or ido. There's only two options. So he comido, I have eaten. He vivido, I have lived. And you can obviously talk about other people as well as yourself. As is the you singular. A, he or she or it has. Hemos, we have. Habéis, you plural have. And an, they have. So for example, if I wanted to say we have spoken, it would be hemos hablado. If I wanted to say we have lived, it would be hemos vivido. So even if you find it difficult to learn that whole haber verb in the present tense, you could just focus on learning the I have and the we have, the and the hemos, and use those with regular verbs, and then it's quite straightforward to put into your own work. Okay, let's have a little look at what happens with irregular verbs. So as you know, in Spanish, not all verbs will always be regular. Most of the past participles are regular, but there are a handful, maybe 10 to 12, that you just need to learn, and you'll come to recognise that are irregular. So nothing changes in terms of the first part. The present tense of haber is always the same. Has, a, hemos, habéis, han. But if you have a look at the red side of the slide, you can see all these verbs. You may recognise most of them in the infinitive form, which I've put in brackets. For example, ver, to see or to watch, doesn't change to vido, it changes to visto. So it's got quite an irregular ending on that past participle. But I mean, hopefully you would recognise that because it looks like vista. You know, a vista is something that you see. Hacer is a really important one. So if you're going to learn any, this is probably the best one to learn. Hacer is obviously the verb to do or to make. So if you wanted to say that you have made something or that you've done something, you need to use hecho rather than hacido. Now, if you forget and you write hacido in your work, or if you say it to a Spanish person, it's no problem. They will understand you. But it will just sound a little bit weird. It will sound a bit grammatically incorrect. Okay, so if you want to say, I have done my homework, he hecho mis deberes. And you've got a whole list of the other irregular verbs here. So as I said, there are about 10 or 12. I've just put the most important ones on here. Some of them you won't necessarily even recognise, but I would make sure you can kind of work out which infinitive they've come from. So for example, escrito has come from escribir, to write. So if you see he escrito, it means I have written. Vuelto, slightly different because of the U and the E at the beginning. But volver, the verb to go back or to return, is a verb that changes in the present tense. Vuelvo, the O changes to a UE. So I return or I go back is vuelvo with a UE. So you should recognise that anyway, hopefully. So yeah, those are the key ones on that slide if you want to go back and have a look at them. If you want to do some practicing of conjugating this tense, you've got an exercise on page 154 of the textbook, exercise 1. So you can have a little go at doing these. If you pause the video, or you can rewind it and go back and have a look at how to form it. There are some notes in the textbook as well to help you. And I'll go through the answers now. So if you don't want to see them yet, pause. Okay, so the first one is terminar, which is a regular AR verb, and it's in the yo form, so it would be he terminado. And I'll translate them into English so you know what you're actually talking about as well. I have finished the maths exercises. Number 2 is aprender, which is a regular ER verb, and we want it in the tu form of haber, so it would be has aprendido. You have learnt the vocabulary very well. And number 3, if you remember, escribir was on our irregular slide, so you need to be careful with this one. And it's in the ella form, so it would be ha escrito un artículo. So she has written an excellent article for the magazine. Number 4 is another irregular one. It's using hacer, and it's the nosotros form, which is we, so it would be hemos hecho. This morning we have done some tests. And I've just put those little stars there to remind you that it's irregular. Okay. Number 5 is abrir, which is another one of the irregular verbs, meaning to open. So in the ellos form, it would be han abierto. They have opened the classroom windows. Number 6 is a nice regular verb. Contestar means to answer. So it would be he contestado. I have answered all of the questions. Number 7 is also regular. Aprobar, meaning to pass. So you have passed would be has aprobado. You have passed the exams. Number 8, another regular verb meaning to understand. So he has understood would be ha entendido. He has understood the explanation very well. Number 9, also regular. It means to give out, and we're talking about the teacher, so we need the she part of the verb haber, which is ha repartido. The teacher has given out the homework. And finally, number 10 is actually an irregular one again, meaning to return or to go back. And it's talking about los estudiantes, the students, which is they. So we need han and the irregular past participle vuelto. The students have returned to the school. Okay, I hope that was helpful. If you want to do more practice, you can go onto thisislanguage.com into the grammar section and have a go at some more perfect tense work. If in doubt, you can just use the preterite to talk about something that you've done or that you did. So that's probably the most important past tense verb. But this is, as I said, a good one to be able to recognise as well.